Again, I'm recording a daf for this weekend. This is daf Masechet Shavuot, daf Mem Hey. So yesterday in daf Mem Daled, which recorded at a different time, we started the Mishnah. The Mishnah that starts the seventh parak of Masechet Shavuot, and the Mishnah starts with the words that Kol Nishba'im. In general, most people, Kol means all, but the Mishnah means most people who make a shvuah, you swear and don't pay. But there are some exceptions, and we went through some of the exceptions, which in the Mishnah, we're going to go through them in the Gemara, but we gave a list of several things, and one of them, the one we got up to, and today we're starting Daf Mem Hey from 4 lines, from 6 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the top of Mem Hey Amud Aleph, the middle of the Mishnah. So the last case we had yesterday in the Mishnah was when shekenegdo chashud hala shvuah, where someone generally would make a shvuah, but they can't because they are blacklisted for making a shvuah because they've lied about shvuat edut, shvuat pikadon, or even a shvuat durabanan. They are not even a shvuat shav, sorry, and even if they're a pasal midrabanan, they can't make the shvuah. Today we get to the next case in the Mishnah, which was a chenvani al pinkaso. So the Mishnah said that a chenvani, a storekeeper who has something written down in his books, he can, if he says, so someone owes me money, the person denies it, he can swear and collect the money, unlike most people who swear and don't pay. Ask the Mishnah, chenvani al pinkaso ketzad, what's the case? Lo sheyomar lo, not where he walks in, the chenvani can't walk into court and say, katuv al pinkasi shata chayav li 200 zuz. It says in my pinkas that Reuven owes me 200 zuz, right? So we don't trust him. I mean, you'd have to prove it. Reuven can deny it. You can't just swear. Ella, the cases where Omerlo, where basically Reuven says to the Chenvani, we'll call him Shimon here, Tein lebeni satayim chitim. Give my son on credit 2 sav chitim. My son doesn't have any money. Give him chitim. I will make good. I'll pay up. Or tein lepoalai b'sela maot. Or give my workers. They come in. Let them eat on the company account. So Reuven said that to Shimon. Reuven, the accused here, said to Shimon the Chenvani. Now, the next day, the question, and the storekeeper said, Hu omer natati. The storekeeper said, okay, I gave your son money. I gave your son food. I gave your workers food. Hein omrim lo natalnu. The son or the workers or the balabayit says they never got anything. So I gave you permission to feed them. You didn't feed them. So there is a case where hein hu nishba v'notel. The storekeeper can swear that he gave it to them and they could and collect from the person, right? The person said to his workers, go to the store and get lunch. So he says, we got lunch, you got to pay $20. The workers deny that they ever took it. So now the workers can swear from the balabayit. They can say, we never got paid our $20, and so you can't deduct it from our wages. So basically, it turns out that because the balabayit said to the storekeeper, give money to my workers, if the workers swear they didn't get it, if the storekeeper swears he did give it, they both basically collect from the balabayit. Amar ben Nanas, that's ridiculous. They're lying, right? You can't both swear. You can't have one group swear that they gave it and one group swear they didn't give it. Ketzad, how can you have this happen? Between the two of them, one of them is clearly making a shvuat shav. They can't both be telling the truth. It's for sure lying. So how can you say you make a shvuah and you make a shvuah when we know we're setting them up for lies? Ella says ben Nanas, who notel shelo b'shvuah, hein notelin shelo b'shvuah, because the circumstance is such that in order to ask them to prove it, we'd have to go into a situation where they each have to make a shvuah. In fact, they don't have to make a shvuah and they could just collect. So obviously, if you're a balabayit, you're not going to say this to a storekeeper because it turns out that you could lose everything, even without getting any benefit. Now it continues the Mishnah. Amar lechenvani. If the person says to the storekeeper, "Tain li b'dinar peirot," I'd like a dinar worth of peirot. So dinars is a good amount of money. I want 2 bushels of strawberries. But natanlo, and the storekeeper gives you your strawberries. Amarlo, okay, now the storekeeper says, Tain li oto dinar. Okay, I'm ready for you to pay up. Where's the dinar? Amarlo said, what are you talking about? I already paid you. Natati v'lach natata b'unpali. I gave it to you and you put it in the cash register. Unpali means like the container that you put the money in, meaning you can't find it right now. It's mixed up in them. So now you have a similar situation where basically the storekeeper gave you objects. No one disputes that. You claim that you paid him. The storekeeper claims you didn't pay him. Says the Mishnah, Yishava Bal Habayit Shnatan Lo Dinar. It's not the Chenvani who controls it. The Bal Habayit can swear that he gave you the dinar, and he doesn't have to. So this is the normal shvua. You make a shvua and you're patur, right? Because you already got the payroll. You get to keep the payroll that you have, and you don't have to pay the money because you swear that you already paid it. Amarlo, but let's say you do it the other way. You say Tainli at perot, right? So meaning the balabayit gives the chenvani money, and he says, "Okay, here's the $100. Okay, now I'd like my food." And the storekeeper says to you, "What do you mean? I gave them to you yesterday." Yesterday I gave you all the food. You came back today with the money. So then yishava chenvani. Then in that case, the chenvani swears, because again, the chenvani is the one who, sorry, the chenvani is the one who says he already gave the payroll. So basically, he would swear and be patur from having to give the payroll again. Rabbi Yehuda says, I disagree. Kosha payroll biyado yado al yona. In fact, it goes after the payroll. Whoever has the payroll yado al yona, you don't even have to make a shvua for that, because look, the guy walks in here and says, you have to give me payroll. I'll be like, you're crazy. I don't owe you anything. I'm not swearing that I don't owe you anything. I don't even know you. I don't have to swear, because the rule, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we'll see in Gemara who Rabbi Yehuda is, but the rule according to Rabbi Yehuda is that you wouldn't have given the payroll unless you wouldn't have given the money unless you got the payroll. So we don't really trust that you didn't get them. The next case in the Mishnah was Amar the Shulchani, right? The Mishnah continues. We are, I don't know where we are, somewhere in the middle over here. Amar the Shulchani. There's Tosfot has Kedei Lahafis. It's like 3 lines above that Tosfot. Amar the Shulchani, you say to the money changer, Shulchani, right, someone who exchanges coins and other things, Tain li b'dinar ma'ot, right? I'm gonna give you a dinar and give me ma'ot. So let's just pick numbers. I don't remember the exact numbers, but dinar is a high denomination. So here's $100. Give me 5 20s, right, or whatever. V'natan lo. So you give him the ma'ot. He gives the small the money, the 100 pennies, let's say. Amarlo. So now the Shulchani says to the balabayit, Tain li et dinar. Okay, so here I give you the change. Give me the big bill. Amarlo, he says, what are you talking about? I already gave it to you. Natati l'cha v'natato b'umpali. I gave it to you and you put it in your container. So there again, yishava balabayit. The balabayit would swear that he already gave it. He doesn't have to give it again. So he would swear and be patur. But let's say the opposite happened, just like the fruits. Natan lo et dinar, the balabayit gives the shulchani the dinar, which is the big denomination coin, and he says, Amarlo teni etamot. Okay, give me the change now. Amarlo natatim lach. I already gave you change. What are you talking about? I gave you 25, 4 quarters already. So then again, Yishava Shulchani, then the Shulchani swears again to pater himself. So this is a normal shvua, that you make a shvua and you don't have to pay. Rabbi Yehuda says, that's not really believable. Because ein derech Shulchani tein isar ad shitol dinar. The Shulchani is not in the business of giving you change before you give him money. So if the Shulchani says, I gave you the change before you gave me the big bill, he's not believed. And so Rabbi Yehuda seems to imply that in this case, the Shulchani would have to pay, actually, could not swear and be patur. He'd actually have to pay the ma'ot, the small change, to the balabayit. Finally, the Mishnah says, almost the end of the Mishnah, Kishem, where am I at? Kishem Shamru, just like they said, now we'll see what this is referring to, but just like they said, Hapogemet Ktubata, a person who has a pagum. Pagum means not a perfect ketubah, meaning a woman shows up with a ketubah, which says that her ex-husband has to pay her, but something about his pagum, she already collected part of it, so it's crossed out and says, only half of it is due, or whatever reason. So she has to make a shvua that she didn't already collect this, because already the ketubah is pagum and we're questioning it. We make her make a shvua before she collects, right? So that's kishem shamru. We already know that halacha from Masechet Ketubot. And furthermore, we know that eid echad mi'idashi parua, if you have one witness that says that the ketubah was already paid back, but not 2, then that's not enough to passel ability for ala b'shva, but she can only collect the shva. Again, this was all stuff that we learned in Ketubot. And furthermore, we learned, chasim mishubadim, if you're collecting from the chasim mishubadim, that, meaning Ruvain lends money to Shimon, Shimon can't pay him back, but Shimon had a field that he sold to Levi. So if Ruvain wants to come to Levi to collect, he's got to swear that he didn't already get paid back by Shimon, right? So lo tifra and nechse yitomim. If you're collecting something from yitomim, where we had higher stringency that we don't, they obviously can't argue back. They don't know all their father's affairs. So then lo tifra ela b'shua. You have to swear if you're collecting from either nechasim mishubadim or from yitomim. And furthermore, nifrat shelo b'fanav. If a woman is collecting her ketubah, a woman's collecting a ketubah, and he's not there, then again, lo tiparala b'shvuah. She can only use a shvuah because maybe if he was there, he would say, "Oh, I already paid you," or something like that. V'chein, this is the last part I'd say that we said it for yitomim li paru ela b'shvuah. So too, yitomim who collect a loan, they have to make a shvuah. We'll see in the Gemara what the shvuah. Oh, we're about to say what the shvuah is. What's the shvuah? They say a shvuah. Now they can't, of course, say that we know our father lent you the money. They don't know anything about their father. He's not alive. But they say shvuah shelo pakadnu abba. We make a shvuah that our father did not placate. He didn't direct us. He didn't teach us. He didn't instruct us on when he was dying that this is not a valid loan. V'lo amar lanu abba. Our father never told us that this is not a good loan. V'lo shelo matzinu ben shtarotav shel abba sheshtar zeparua. We never found documentation that this has been paid back. So we really can't verify this loan because we weren't maybe alive or part of it when the father made it. We have a shtar that says you owe our father and therefore us $1,000. All we can swear is that we don't know, and our father never told us that this was paid back. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. Rabbi Yochanan Broka says, really, Rabbi Yochanan Broka says, really, even afilu nolada ben l'chamitata av, even if the son wasn't even alive when the father was alive, right? You have a situation where a man lends money to someone, he dies, his wife is pregnant, his son is born after his death. He never even overlapped. Forget about he was 2 years old or 1 year old. Still, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, reason nishbam hotel, you can swear and you can collect. Now, what are you swearing? You never met your father, but you're going to swear, we don't have any knowledge that my father paid this back. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, this is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, I want to add one detail here. If there are witnesses, external witnesses, right? So Ruvain shows up with a star that says that he lent $1,000 to Shimon. Shimon's dead. So he goes to the Yitomim of Shimon to collect it. The Yitomim, of course, I guess it could work either way, but let's just say it that way, right? Then the Yitomim, sorry, the opposite way, I take it back. The Shimon has a star that says he lent $1,000 to Ruvain. Shimon dies. Right, so Shimon's Yitomim now show up with the star to collect from Ruvain. So we said in the beginning of the Mishnah, they can't collect unless they make a shvuah because we don't know. Maybe Ruvain would have paid, maybe Ruvain could claim, right? Ruvain's denying it, right? So Ruvain says, I already paid it back, right? I don't know why you have the star still, but you still have the star. So maybe if Shimon was alive, Shimon would be able to admit that he paid him back. So the Yitomim have to swear that we have no knowledge that our father Shimon paid you back. He never told us that. Says Reb Shimon Gamliel now, but if there are external witnesses, the father said while he was dying, basically on his deathbed, shtar ze eino parua. This shtar has not been collected. Then, even though he's dead, the witnesses can come basically and stamp it. And hu notel shelo b'shvuah. The Yitomim collect without making a shvuah because we trust the father, right? The whole reason you make a shvuah is because the father who wrote the shtar is not alive. If the father was alive, you don't need to swear when you have a shtar. A shtar would be good enough. And since the father on his deathbed, when he does not have incentive to lie because he's not going to benefit from it, said that it was a valid shtar, we trust it and we don't make a shvuah. And almost the end, Elu nishmain shelo b'tana. There's a couple. So we're talking about strange situations where you make a shvuah and you collect. These following people make a shvuah without even a clear claim, right? Usually to make a shvuah, you'd have to say, you owe me $1,000, I admit to 500. Here, or some witnesses saw you. Here you have relationships where we know that there's a lot of undocumented things that happen. So for example, shutfim, partners, right? You got partners, at the end of 10 years, they break up, right? They close the business. One partner says to the other, every single day, I don't trust that you kept the book straight. Maybe you took more than you were supposed to. And so he can make him swear that he didn't, or that it's all equal. Or arisim, sharecroppers, right? Again, same kind of thing. Sharecroppers supposed to take a certain amount. How do you know they didn't take some extra? How do you know they cut the grain the right way? So these are like professions where it's really hard to trust. And so helping to trust is the Chazal made up of shvuah. Apotropim, who's like an agent for a minor usually. The isha hanoset v'notenet b'toch habayit. A woman who does business inside the house, again, just because there's a lot of opportunity for her to do stuff that no one's checking. And so if the husband says to her, I want you to swear that you didn't do it improperly, you didn't hide any money, she has to do that. Uben habayit. And a ben habayit, usually what a ben habayit means is like the oldest or the main son after the father dies, who takes over, and it's really like the, not the valet, but like the business manager of the house. So now, Marlo Mata Torneni. So all these people say, what are you coming to me, my partner, the Aris? What's your claim? What are you saying? You have proof that I stole from you? You think I did something wrong? The other person only has to say, I don't have any proof of anything. Ritzoni shetishavali. I want you to swear that everything is kosher and fine. Chayav. You got to make that shua. So they made this halacha that because these are situations where things often happen inappropriately, you have to swear that they are appropriate. The final thing in the Mishnah was chalku hashutfim v'harisim. Once the partners and the sharecropper split up, you can't come back a year later and say, oh, wait, I got a bad deal. I want you to swear. Once the deal is over, the deal is over. So once the partners split, you can't come back later and ask for a shvuah unless you have proof. However, if you can roll along a shvuah from somewhere else, then you can make him swear about everything. And the final thing in our Mishnah is hashvi'it mishametet the shvuah. And very interestingly, we'll get to this much later in the Gemara, Shemitah takes away the responsibility to make a shvuah, right? So the same way, remember we said partners have to swear if you want them to swear, but if Shemitah passes, that right goes away, and we will discuss this in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara now, on Daf Mem Hey, right? Mem Hey Amid Aleph at the first of the only intermediate wide line. This was the principle our Mishnah said. Anytime you swear in the Torah, you swear and you don't pay. Minalan, how do we know that? Because the pasuk explicitly says in Mishpatim, right? So meaning, misha alav l'shalem lo shvuah. The one who usually pays, you make a shvuah to pot yourself from paying. So usually the shvuah takes away from paying. But there are some exceptions, and the Mishnah continued and said, "Elu nishbei menotzlin," and we gave all the exceptions to the rule. It says Gemara, why maishna sachir, right? A sachir is a worker hired help for you. We said that unlike usually where you swear in your putter, if the sachir comes to the owner at the end of the day and says, you owe me $100 for today, and the owner says, the balabait, we call him, says, I already paid you. Sachir says, you didn't pay me. Usually the balabait would swear that he paid him, right? And he'd be putter. Our Mishnah, we said there's a takana that the sachir swears and he gets to collect the $100. Ask Gemara why. Maishna sachir to tekin le'rabanan de mishtabah v'shakel. Why did the Rabbanan make a takana by the sachir that he can swear and collect? Amr Yehuda Amr Shmuel halachot gedolot shanukan. These are big halachot. This is what do you mean halachot? Halachot usually means hani hilchot usually means halachah Moshe Misinai. Tell me you're right. Takanot gedolot shanukan. The rabbis made big takanot to help the world order. We'll see why in a second. Before we answer that, this is what gedolot. I mean takanot gedolot. These are big ones. Mechlad ikik tanot. They're like minor takanot. I mean, what are you talking about? Elamar of Nachman Rishon. No, you're being a little bit too nudnicky on the words here. Takanot kivuot shanukan. These are kivuot. It means they're fixed. They're permanent. Takanot the Chachamim taught. Akru Rabbanan the Shua mi Balabait. The Rabbanan picked up. They took away the Shua from the Balabait. Normally, if a Balabait said, "I paid you," and the Paul said, "You didn't pay me," the Balabait. The Pole wants to take money from the Balabait would usually swear and say, I already paid you. They took the shvuah from the Balabait and they gave it to the Sachir, that the Sachir can say, I wasn't paid, and the Balabait will have to pay him, Mishum Kedei Chayav, to support his life. The Sachir needs the money. This is a very worker-friendly daf we're going to see. The Sachir needs the money to live, and so they allowed him to be in control. So what if he needs the money to live? There's a balabait here. Mishum kidei chayav d'sachir continually a balabait, right? I feel very bad for the poel. He needs his money, but you can't steal from the balabait or punish the balabait just because of the sachir. It says no. Balabait gufa nichale. The balabait wants the sachir to feel the mishtabah sachir v'shakil, that he can swear that he didn't get paid and collect the money. Kihecha delitgarun le poalim, so that he can find people to work for him. Right? Obviously, if people are never going to be paid or not be paid quickly or not be paid if there's a debate, then we're worried that people are not going to come to work. So it's really bad for business. Says the Gemara, I don't get it. The Sachir also needs to work, right? Adarab, Sachir nichal yishtaba bal habayit. Why don't you say that the Sachir wants the bal habayit to swear that he and be putter, v'nafka and be putter, ki echad legre bal habayit. So bal habayit wants to hire people, right? If there's such favorable conditions for the workers, then no one's going to hire them, because if they ever dispute something, they're going to win. So maybe you should make the bal habayit favorable. This is a discussion that goes on in economics all the time. Says, well, the bal habayit al korchi agir. The Baal Bayit has less flexibility because he has to hire people to work. He can't do the work himself. He's going to hire a plumber. Says, but a plumber needs to eat also. Sachir nami al karchi mitzgar. He's got to work, right? Ella says, well, you're right. It's not because of justice and fairness or anything like that. It's that Baal Bayit tarud b'po'alafu. The Baal Bayit is thinking about many people, about many things. The Po'el is thinking about himself, right? So the Po'el is a one-man thing. He knows, like, the Baal Bayit has to deal with not all the people and all the work and all the bills and all, and everything. And so he has much more on his mind, and therefore we trust the Poel more. Doesn't matter if you trust the Poel so much, leitiv le below shvuah. Let him collect without a shvuah, right? Let you trust the Poel. Baal Bayit's not reliable. Let the Poel show up and say, I wasn't paid, and you pay him. Oh, well, no, that's kedei lafis datu shel Baal Bayit. You have to make it more acceptable to the Baal Bayit that he's not just going to be ripped off, that someone at least is going to make a shvuah. This is where I got a much better answer. Let the Baal Bayit pay him with edim, and then he can always say, forget about a shvuah. I paid you in front. I have documentation. I have a video that I paid you. This is where that's too much work. Trichale milta. It's too much work. You got to find edim. You got to get people together. At the end of the day, no one's going to want to do that. Okay, let the make car. So why don't you make a new rule? Always you pay before business starts. In the morning, you have a plumber, you pay the plumber for the day. So at the end of the day, there's never going to be a machloket. Was I paid already? Was I not paid already? Well, that's not good either. Everyone wants it to be on credit, meaning, as Rashi explains, if you pay someone in the morning, they spend all the money during that day. They go out to lunch, and then by the end of the day, they come home with nothing. Or the Baal Bayit doesn't have the money in the morning. He earns it during the day. And so it's not really beneficial for either one to get paid in the morning. Okay, so therefore, this is why I turn the page to Daf Mem Hey Amud Bet, but this is why the Sachir can swear and collect. Says where if this is the real reason, so Afilo Katzatz Nami. So why wouldn't it be the same halacha if they fixed a price? What does that mean? Alamatanya, we have a brayta that actually says, Uman Omer. Let's say the worker, in this case the Poel, right, says, Shtaim Katzatzili. We agreed on a job for today. I'm working for you as a plumber all day. You told me you're paying me $200. Halam, the Baal Bayit says, no, look, it's not to the halachat. They only pay one. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have a contract, obviously. Says the Braita, Motzi Michavera Lav Haraya, right? You have to, if you want to collect two, you have to prove it. So you only get one. Why don't we say the Poel should swear and collect? Why isn't it the same thing as this case? We want to favor the Poel. Says where because no, you remember how much you paid a person, how much you agreed. People remember how they negotiate. What you don't remember is whether you did it or not, right? You might have gotten it, you might not have given it. So therefore, if it's a case that they're disputing the value, the agreement, then you don't say that the Baal Bayit is too tarud. He knows that. Yachi says, well, this is the reason. What about Afila Varzmano Nami? Right? Now remember this, the story here is that at the end of the day, the worker comes and says, I'm here to get paid. The Baal Bayit says, I already paid you. So they're debating. But the Braita we're going to see in a second says that if the next day comes, remember, you have to pay your workers at the end of the day. If the next day the worker comes and says, I didn't get paid yesterday, he's not believed anymore. Why not? I feel Avar's Nami, if it's the next day, he should believe the Paul as well. Alamatanya, why do we have a Braita that says, Avar's Manav Natanlo? If the time that you're supposed to pay someone, which is a day worker during the day, night worker at night, if that time is passed and you didn't pay him, you can no longer swear. Says, well, that's because Chazakain Baal Bayit over Baal Talin. Because the Baal Bayit is not going to let, it's a lotas in the Torah. Don't leave over your workers from being paid. So the Baal Bayit is going to be, at the end of the day, he's going to sit down and he's going to be very, very careful to make sure he paid all his bills. So he doesn't, not over the sisser. This is where, well, but you said he can't pay attention. You said the Baal Bayit has so much going on. He's got so many workers and so many things and the contractors. So I don't get it. Maybe he's not going to remember. Says, no, no. Hani mili mikami zman chiyuva. That's only before the end of the day, before the zman chiyuva. There, he's still in the middle of doing 500 things at the end of the day. Workers come to him, right? We all have experienced this. Someone comes to you when you're in the middle of doing other things, says, I'm ready to get paid. You're like, come back later. I can't deal with this right now. But if you push me, I'll say, I remember that I already paid it to you, even though I'm not that reliable. But at the end, kimat zman chiyuva, at the end of the day, you sit down with your books, Rami Anafshe Mitkar. You remember, you go through your day, and you can come to a memory of exactly what happened. Says well, okay, but so you're saying that the next day we don't trust the Sachir because the Balabait would not be over on Bal Talin. But there's a second party here. The Sachir is coming and claiming that he didn't get paid. If he's lying, he's stealing. Right? Why do you go with the Balabait? Because you're saying Chazakah, he's not going to go against Bal Talin. Why don't you go with the Sachir? Chazakah, he's not going to steal. Says well, it's true. Both of them have a prohibition. But Gabi Balabait ikutre chazaki. The Balabait has two, strikes in his favor, or two things in his favor. First of all, First of all, one is that we don't assume that people are going to be over on an isser of Baltalin. But second of all, it's very uncommon for someone to go home not getting paid. Right? Usually a person wants to get paid. So the fact that he went home and came back the next day to get paid is unusual. And because of that, we trust the Balabait in that case. Okay, so that is, the overview of the Sachir. Now, says Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, trying to think how this is, around 15 lines or so from the top. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, I'm sort of the middle of the narrow lines. All of this that we just said, Lo shanu al shesachro be'edim. This is only true if there are witnesses that say that we saw the Balabait hire the plumber this morning. And at the end of the day, the plumber says, I wasn't paid. The Balabait says, you were paid. That's where it makes a difference. But if nobody saw the Balabait hire the poel, the plumber, then, when the plumber comes and says, you owe me money for my day, and the Balabait says, I already paid you, the Balabait could have just said, I don't know who you are, right? You didn't work in my house today. And no one can prove that's right. So mitoch shiachalo marlo, because the Balabait could have said to him, Lo scharticha me'olam, I never hired you to work for me, assuming there are no witnesses that saw him be hired to work there. So then he has a migo. Yachol Omar, he could say, oh, no, I did hire you, scharticha, and I paid you. So when our Mishnah says that the Poel is believed in that case, it's only if there was proof that he was hired. So the Balabait can no longer say, I never hired you. So that's where he's not believed. Amar le Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Yasher, that's really good stuff. Yasher koach. And Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. No, what do you mean Rabbi Yochanan? What about Rish Lakish? Rabbi Yochanan said that and not Rish Lakish? So, meaning it seems pretty logical. You can argue some say, no. Rish Lakish, mishta v'shati le v'shatik le. Rish Lakish was mishta. He was drinking. He was getting a coffee, and he was quiet. And by the time Rav Yitzchak walked out of the room, he didn't hear Rish Lakish's opinion. Otherwise, he would have said Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. And some say that in fact Rish Lakish never talked in front of Rabbi Yochanan. That he would usually let Rabbi Yochanan talk, wait some time, and then he would give his comments later, or he would agree or not agree. But Rav Yitzchak only heard Rabbi Yochanan, not Rish Lakish. Itmar Nami, in fact, we have a statement where Itmar Nami is the third to last narrow line. Amar Menashe bar Zvid, Simra Menashe bar Zvid Amarav, Lo shanu al shescharo be'edim. This whole Mishnah that says you trust the Sachir is only if there were witnesses, so it's proven that he worked there. Avischaro shelo be'edim, if he was hired and worked without witnesses, mitoch sheichol lomar lo, because the Balabait can say, Lo scharticha me'olam, I never hired you. Thanks for coming, but I did not ask you to do a job for me. Yochal lomar lo, he can then say from amigo, Scharticha, no, I did hire you, but I already paid you. Tati lecha scharcha. Amar Rabbi Barchama, said Rabbi Barchama, I love this Gemara. This is great. Kama ma'alya hashmaita. How nice, how wonderful is this Gemara that we're on the second wide line that we're learning today, basically, right? This halacha. Amalei Rava said, Rava, what's so great? My Malyuta, why are you so excited about this, right? Because, what was Rava's question? Rava said, in Cain, Shvat Shomim Dechayev Rachmana Heichem Mishkachta. How can you ever, I don't understand why this logic, how can you ever have a Shvat Shomim? right? You give someone to a shomer to watch. You come back the next day and say, "Can I have my watch? I keep using that example. Can I have my coffee maker back?" And the shomer says, your coffee maker was here, but someone came and stole it overnight. So he has to make a shvuah that someone stole it, and then he's patur, right? But how can you trust it? Why do you have to make a shvuah? You have to make a shvuah. Why can't he just say, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have your coffee maker," right? Because he could have said to him, "I don't have your coffee maker. I don't know what you're talking about." So therefore, and then so he can say, "I had your coffee maker, and a hurricane came and blew it away." So how do you ever make a shvuah? How can you ever be chayiv to swear? This Gemara, that's not a problem. Let's say you have proof, just like with the Sachir, that saw him give you the coffee maker. So what if Adam saw you give the coffee maker? He could have said, "I gave it back to you. Sure, you gave me a coffee maker. Last night I brought it to your house." And he'd be believed. So then why isn't he then trusted to say it was an onus and never have to make a shvuah? Answers the Gemara, the Afkele B'shtar. You're right. It would have to be a shtar. It would have to be a document that says Reuven gave Shimon his coffee maker to watch. And Shimon now can't say, "Oh, I gave it back to you," because if you gave it back to me, why do you still have the shtar? So therefore, you can't say, "I gave it back to you." You can't say, I didn't have it, and that's why you have to make a shvuah. Michlal, what that seems to imply, I would say, the Tervayos here that both Rava and Rami Bar Chama hold that that even if you have proof that you you gave something to someone to watch with witnesses, he can then come and claim, "I gave it back to you." So ein sarich lachzir lo be'edim. You don't have to give it back with witnesses. That's why you can say, "I might have given it back to you." And if you give it b'shtar, but if you give it with the shtar, tzarich lachzir lo be'edim, you'd have to give it back with edim. And if you don't have edim, then the fact that there's a shtar that says that he gave it to him means that he can't ever say, I don't have it anymore. Kari Rama Bar Chama alei Rav Sheshet. Now, Rami Bar Chama said about Rav Sheshet, and we'll see why in a second. We are 6 lines from the bottom. The pasuk that said in Shmuel about David HaMelech. It says, "Vayasim David et advarim elo alibo bilibo." David put these words in his heart. This is the story where he went and he acted in a funny way. So David paid attention, basically, put this thing on his heart. What's that referring to? What's alibo? Let me read that. Where am I? To Ashkechei Rav Sheshet, the Rabbi Bar Shmuel, because Rav Sheshet found Rabbi Bar Shmuel. Amalei said, T'nimar midid b'sachir. Did you hear anything good about the halacha of the sachir, the halacha of our Mishnah, that a sachir who usually would have to let the Balabait swear if he claims, "I wasn't paid," the Balabait says you were paid, but our Mishnah says the sachir can swear and collect. Have you heard anything good about that? I'm like, yeah, I heard some great stuff. Tanina, you know what I learned? That the Braita says, "Sachir bismano," this is a Tosefta, a Sachir, if it's in the time, meaning the evening when you're still supposed to be being paid, Nishbav and Hotel, he swears and collects. Ketzad, what does that mean? Bisman shamarlo, if the Sachir says, "Sachartani v'lonatata schari," you hired me and you didn't pay me. Hala Amar, and the Balabait says, "Scharticha, I did hire you, but I paid you." And then the Sachir can swear and collect. Aval Marlo, we saw this all before. But if he says to him, if the Sachir says, "You agreed to pay me 2, shtaim katzatzti li," and the Balabayit says, "No, I only agreed to pay you 1, v'lo merlo katzatzti l'cha lachat," then amotzi mechaver olav haraya, right? Then you've got to bring a proof. Says the Gemara, let me see how much further we should go. Okay, we're going to do this. Amar, hami the seifa baraya havi. Now, 1 second. If the seifa is a case where you have to bring a proof, right? So then, Reisha below Raya. The point is that the Reisha is where you don't have to bring a proof, right? And so this seems to be a really, really important halacha, because basically the second part of this Braita, the part where you disagreed about the number, the amount of money, right? That's where there is some proof, meaning there are witnesses who say, we have to bring witnesses if you want to collect. But the implication is then the Reisha, you don't even need witnesses. But Rav and Shmuel both said that the person, the Sachir, can only collect if there are witnesses that he was hired. Because if there are no witnesses that he was hired, then the Balabait has a migo that he could have denied ever hiring him. So this goes against that. It's such a great thing. Says Rav Nachman Yitzchak, it's not really true. And turn to page Shadaf Mem Vav. Reisha v'Seifa b'Ra'aya. No. Both of them could be talking about where there's a proof that he was hired. Because remember, According to Rav and Shmuel, if there's no proof that he was hired, then the Baal Bait is believed because he could have always said, I didn't hire him. So what's the difference between the two cases? Raya de l'shalem katani. The Bright is only mentioning a proof that it was paid, not Raya de shvua lo katani. It's not mentioning the proof that you need in order to make a shvua. But it is true that the Sachir would only make a shvua and collect his money in the first case if there was proof that he was hired. Because if, according to Rav and Shmuel, if there's no proof that he's hired, then he is not able to make a shvua and collect because the Baal Bait has a migo that he could have said, I didn't hire him. So he's trusted to say, I hired him, but I already paid him. And we will stop here at the top of Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph and hopefully pick it up from there on Monday morning. Thank you all. And to those listening on Sunday, Shevuot Tov.